Hi everyone, I'm Anna and today we are going to do something different, as you probably already read in the title or saw in the thumbnail. Recently we were working in our front yard and a neighbor was so kind to help us a bit. We were chatting and I mentioned that I like to try new creative things. Then she walked into her house and brought back this box. She had this pyrograph, but she don't use it anymore. It's a basic, single heat, solid tip wood burner you can find for cheap in many craft stores or online. I tested the different tips on a piece of scrap wood so that I had an idea of what they can do. I cut out this piece of wood to postcard size, so today we're going to see if I can make something nice with it. The very first thing I do is engrave the reflection in the eye with my rotary tool. When I get over it with a wood burner, the tip doesn't touch the reflection because it's a bit deeper in the wood. That's not cheating, that's just making smart use of the opportunities I have at my disposal. Because I don't think this pyrograph can work super detailed around the reflection. So I'll start with the eye, because that's the first thing you look at in an illustration and it has to be good. If I can't get the eye right, I can either discard the entire drawing or sand everything down again. See how well that reflection stays untouched by engraving it first with the rotary tool? Then I first color the dark parts of the rabbit's fur and leave the white parts open for a while. I don't make everything the darkest tone at once, because it's easier to darken later on than having to sand it back down to a light color. For the most part, I use the leaf-shaped tip. Although it's not mentioned in the device description, I understand it's best for shading. I make zigzagging movements and use the very tip of the leaf shader. Sorry for the lighting here. Since it's still very hot upstairs in my studio, I worked outside under our canopy. The sun peeks through the grapes just below the roof. In a moment I will hang up a blanket against the light and then it will get better, I promise. I'm not going for hyper-realism here. I have the photo purely for reference and don't aim for perfection. That makes your life a whole lot easier. The wood burner is not very comfortable to hold. The tip is very far from the handle and the handle quickly becomes too hot to hold, so I have to grab the pen almost at the back near the cord. I use the box of the wood burner to rest my hand on to make it a little bit more comfortable. At the top of the screen I mention how fast the footage plays, and I also leave some real-time footage in between. This will give you an idea of how long it actually takes to make such a small illustration like this. This drawing took me about 5 hours to make. I worked on it from 11 AM to 4 PM. You just can't rush pyrography, because especially with a device like this that only goes up to about 400 degrees Celsius, if you move too quickly, you simply won't get a mark on the wood. This wood burner doesn't get as hot as the wood burners with an adjustable temperature, so it's hard to get a really dark tone. For a light tone, move quickly across the surface, and for a darker color, hold the tip longer on the wood. When changing the tip, you must let the device cool down completely. Warming up takes 6 minutes and cooling down takes about 10 minutes, so with a pyrograph like this, you spend a lot of time changing the tips in between and not to overheat the device. A few times during the burn I had to unplug the pyrograph because I was afraid it would overheat. So you really have to take your time for this. So if patience is not your cup of tea, this probably isn't for you. But since this is still faster than stippling, I can handle it. For the observant viewer, I know that this piece of wood is not cut completely straight, but hopefully it will not be very noticeable when the rabbit is ready. I thought, for a first project, let me pick something easy to make. Now you may be thinking, a rabbit with all that fur and tonal gradation, is that easy to start with? Well, when I look in the booklet of this wood burning kit, or look on Pinterest for inspiration on starting pyrographers, I come across simple line drawings. No shading, no natural texture, and that's not the look I'm going for. It's just not my thing. Now I know from my first glass engraving project that it's very difficult for a beginner to create smooth, even surfaces, so I thought I'd go for something that's up my alley, but also has some texture of its own, like an animal, so that's what I'm doing. Since I already have several years of experience with drawing, a rabbit is less difficult for me to start with than you might think. I don't know if I'm completely happy with the grass, but that's something to worry about for another time. For me, this was more about testing out what this device is capable of, especially whether I get the fur right and if I have some control over the contrast in an illustration. And I have to say that overall I'm very happy with the result so far, although the really dark colors towards black are quite challenging to make. This device simply does not get hard enough for that. I wanted a pyrograph for a very long time now, but a good wood burner is quite an expensive investment. With this device I can at least see if I have a feel for the techniques and if I like it enough to save for an upgrade. I've done a part of it now, and even though the ergonomics of this device are a disaster, I think it's really fun to do. Just watch the bunny slowly emerge from the wood, and no ink is used. Isn't that amazing? Over time, the leaf shaders seemed to stop working that well. So I decided to take a break, and when the tip had completely cooled down, I ran it over some fine sandpaper to sand off the built-up layer of carbon. Then I swapped the tip for another one I wanted to create the finer details with. With that tip I was better able to create individual hairs and add some tonal variation here and there. Fur doesn't consist of one even layer with hair. It's made up of individual strands of hair which overlap each other. So you're dealing with shadows and with highlights. Learning to look at objects and reference photos is important in most types of art. It's those little details that makes an illustration realistic or more stylized. Noticing those details comes with practice and experience. So don't be frustrated if you doesn't get it right away. The rabbit's whiskers are dark. They are easy to make by simply burning them in. But sometimes you have to deal with white whiskers that you want to stand out against dark fur. What you can do is, like I did with the reflection in the eye, first engraving it with the rotary tool so that the pyrograph don't touch the wood in that area, or make a small indentation with a pointed object. It's like masking fluid when painting. You can also carve them afterwards with a sharp knife, or, if you are very precise, just work around them with a wood burner. It's just what works best for you. At the end I switched back to the leaf shader because I wanted the rabbit's back to be a bit darker. Maybe I wasn't patient enough or the pyrograph stopped working, but I didn't quite get the dark tone I wanted. Later I found the old soldering iron from my husband and I found out that the tips from the kit of this wood burner also fits on that soldering iron. So instead of waiting for that old tip to cool down, I screwed another tip onto the soldering iron and I just had to wait for it to heat up. That saved some time. This tip is a bit thicker, but seems to be able to produce a slightly darker tone. I think this one is officially for writing and line art, but I wanted to use it for the final dark lines and accents. Then I wanted to bring back some light hairs where necessary, by touching it up with a rotary tool with a fine diamond bit. This wood is a bit older and already slightly discolored, so when I go over it with a rotary tool, I engrave the wood back to its light original color, making those details stand out even more. Some people use a white pencil or even watercolor or acrylic in combination with their work, but that's for another time to try. I'm done for now. Like I said, it took me about 5 hours in total to make, but it was well worth it. And that was it. Can we just take a moment and look how cute this rabbit turned out? I really didn't expect this outcome from this type of wood burner. Of course, it's my first art piece with it, and from up close you can see some imperfection, but it really exceeded all my expectations. And I fell in love with pyrography. I definitely want to start saving for a professional wood burner. I also made a postcard out of it by burning this on the back, in case I want to send it to someone. Let me know what you think of the video and if you're interested in more content like this, because in my mind I can already see a whole new series of videos on this subject for my YouTube channel. Have a nice day, until next time.